So while my fellow panelists sit, I remember in 2008 I had the wonderful privilege of going to live in America, and took my family across. I wanted to give them a bigger perspective of the village, of the earth, and I was there for 2 years, and I came back in June of 2010, and actually arrived back when the World Cup was about to take place. We were about to host the Soccer World Cup. And I remember the first morning after being back, driving down Armstrong Avenue, which overlooks the city that I'd lived in my entire life, except for 2 years. And I began to weep. And I realized that God had to take me away to bring me back, to break my heart for the city of Durban. And every time that I drove down that hill, to this day, I weep over Durban. I think she is the most attractive, most beautiful city on planet Earth. And I want to say to you this afternoon that she's so worth it. She's so worth our engagement. She's so worth our involvement. And she's so worth our activation. And as I chat with these panelists this afternoon, I have had the incredible privilege of the last 2 months of chatting and interviewing and finding the stories of the business men and women in our city. It's been an incredible journey. I want to encourage you. If you feel isolated, go out and find the stories. Go out and find the men and women who are at the cold face of what God is doing in our city. Because you will be transformed. And actually something will be birthed in your heart. And so I'm going to do my best to try and get the gold out of these 4 incredible people. And I've asked Bones just to facilitate, because Spoo, one of my panelists here, I want to give him the best opportunity to express himself in his mother tongue, because English is not his first language, and I want to respect that. But at the end there, we have an incredible man. Karabo, who I've known for a while now, has an incredible history. He was the first black head boy of any private school in South Africa. He was the black head boy of Hilton College. And I sat with him, and I actually came away after having met with him, just trying to get into his mind. His dad was a doctor, and his dad was the founder of the Black Consciousness Movement, together with Steve Biko. His dad was the youngest political prisoner ever to be imprisoned in South Africa. Incredible man. And but the remarkable thing is that his mom was an entrepreneur, and she used to own the market behind Workshop, and used to literally have own hot dogs stores. And as I chatted to Karabo, I realized that whilst his father was very impactful in terms of fashioning his worldviews, it really was his mom who put a deposit inside of him. And so, Karabo, won't you tell us a little bit about, I said to him, what were some of your family conversation? It must have been hectic. You were like a revolutionist. In fact, he was named after a Cuban revolutionist. But tell us about those early days.
Chris, you're very kind. It's so good to be here today. It's so encouraging to see the body of Christ gathered the way we are. And I just want to commend everyone who made the conscious effort to get away from the business of life, to be here and to contribute to unity. And to unity that's going to lead to action, which is what our city needs. And I want to commend the organizers of this conference. It's an amazing thing that they've done, and I think this is just the beginning. And I think there's a lot to be excited about in the movement that we're building here together. In terms of what does dinner look like at my house, it's funny because my wife comes from from the Eastern Cape, interestingly enough. Bones, she comes from King Williamstown, interestingly enough, the city that he referenced, and she comes from a quiet family of teachers and educators. And so it's been, as much as my wife and I culturally perhaps don't look that different at the surface of things, in terms of the kinds of families we come from, we couldn't be more different. So there's been extreme culture shock for her since we got married, and she's had to engage with my family and my parents. Her parents are quiet and reserved and private in their mannerisms, and my family is the complete opposite. So dinner is just one long argument about everything under the sun. And in particular, arguments between my dad and I about what it means to be South African and what this country needs, and what it's going to take for the vision that a whole generation of great South Africans, of whom my father is just one, who gave all that there was to give, including their life's blood, for freedom, for us to find a way to bring that freedom, that real freedom, to give it full expression in this country. And we're not there yet. And I think I live with a deep sense of not being there, a sense of an unfulfilled promise for our nation. And I know for someone like my dad who spent 10 years on Robben Island, this is not the South Africa that he fought for. This is not the South Africa that he gave his life for. And he yearns for so much more. And I think as the body of Christ who live in the inheritance of Jesus' sacrifice at the cross, who died that we could be free and that all his children could experience real freedom, complete freedom, economic freedom, spiritual freedom, physical freedom, freedom from death itself, we as a church need to be not satisfied with the world that we live in. This South Africa is not the South Africa that Jesus died for. And we have the mandate from Christ above to bring his kingdom come. And his kingdom has not yet come. And so we need to be about the business of being his agents of change. And so that's what I've taken from Jesus, my Savior, and what I've taken from the experience of seeing how my parents have lived their lives, is that freedom is worth giving everything for, and that we haven't yet got that freedom.
Sure. Should become a politician, buddy. So I had the incredible privilege of meeting Spoo one day. I can honestly tell you it's one of the most inspirational stories that I've ever heard. I came away incredibly inspired. Spoo owns a business. He's got an insurance brokerage, a very successful business. He's recently even veered into opening a panel beating shop. And the inspiration behind his story is that he was brought up in L section of KwaMashu. And I got to find out that living in L section KwaMashu was basically a death sentence or a prison sentence. He told me that up to 80% of his friends and families were either killed or they were imprisoned. And he got brought up, I hear Karabo's story. This is the East and the West. And he got brought up in very challenging circumstances. So, Spoo, I want to ask you, tell us a little bit about those challenges and how those have fashioned you as a man and as a businessman.
Ngiyabonga Chris. Njengoba usushilo igama uSibusiso, and I don't know how many of you knows KwaMashu L section. How we grew up lapana in a way that it was a forum house. In that forum house, two rooms. Any family got the it was another family, and in another room, there was another families also. In there were two families living in one forum. So we would have in such a way you would say each and every time more would say ufuna ukuya esikoleni mama ukuthi ufuna ukuya esikoleni kumele ukuthi ke yena kuze ukwazi ukuphila kahle kumele ukuthi ke yena ube gangster, so otherwise ububa nenkinga if kukuthi ayindlela.
So Spoo is saying that as you got the context of his living condition, that in this four-room house there were actually two families that lived there, and in the Mlazi L section, in order to make ends, KwaMashu L section, sorry, thank you. In order to make ends meet and even to get to school, to pay for your school fees, the only way to do it was if you became part of a gangster community. So if you became an actual gangster.
And I took a decision, looking at the family and looking at indlela umuntu akhule ngayo, and I took a decision yokuthi ngifuna ukuhluka, I want to be different. So, and ngathatha istand sokuthi I will be the only first person kwi-family nakubo bonke abantu engikhule nabo ukuthi ngiqede isikole to have matric. And ngifuna ukuba umuntu oqala futhi okwaziyo ukuthi ayena ngishade ngibe nezingane ngaphandle kokuthi ayena ngibe nezingane ngaphandle yabo. And ngathatha i-decision yokuthi ngathatha i-decision yokuthi ayena ngifuna ukuthi ngibe nebusiness lawo.
So Sbu, looking at the circumstances that he grew up under, took a decision upon himself that he was going to rise above these. Most importantly, he made a decision that he was going to get married and that he was going to have children in marriage, not outside of marriage, and that he was going to truly make a success of himself.
So if mangase ngithi ngiyachaza ukuthi ngifike kanjani yonke into ekade yenzeka, it was through miracles. Everything ebekade yenzeka, it was ukuthi kena ngisebenza kanzima and bengifocus eyintweni ebekade zenzeka. So I've tried. Mangase ubuza noma ngabe yini into mhlawumbe yobugebengu ngiyayazi, and ubuze indlela yokukhula ngiyayazi. So bekunzima bona but
it wasn't because I was ignorant that I decided to do it. It was because I was consciously aware. So if you ask me about gangsterism, I'll tell you about gangsterism. If you ask me about the environment that I grew up in, I can tell you every aspect and detail of this. So it wasn't because I wasn't aware of it. It was because I was fully aware of what was going on that I decided to take a decision not to become what was happening in my environment.
Fantastic, Sbu. You're an inspiration. So Bashni, your story too is an inspirational one. Your grandfather was a stowaway on a ship from India at the age of 16. And on the ship, just correct me if I tell the story incorrectly, but on the ship, your grandfather met a family who took him in when he arrived here. And he ended up marrying their daughter. And that was their passage into Durban. Your father was a teacher. And your mother was a stay-at-home mom, and she was quite legalistic in terms of women were not to have a career. And yet somehow you broke that cycle, and a young Indian lady from Merebank went and studied industrial psychology. Tell us how the heck that happened.
I think I was having a chat with my husband earlier, the talk show host, by the way. If I look at the person I am now, I would never have dreamed that this would be possible then. We grew up in Merebank, flanked, for those of you who don't know Merebank, it's next to Wentworth, and it's flanked on either side by Mondi and Engine, so pollution galore. My mum always believed that I would possibly be married off very early because she got married at the age of 15. And in the Indian community way back then, if mothers saw you in the church and they liked you, for their sons, then they would approach your parents. So from the age of 14, I started receiving requests to bring the son home. And thank God I had an older brother, 6 years older, who fought my mom on it every single time. And I didn't end up getting married then. While my dad was an educator, he spent very little time at home. He was involved in the community and sports and all of that. So basically brought up by my mom. Everything that I wanted to do, from playing tennis, swimming lessons, going to the movies, everything was a no. I think by the time I got to grade 11, standard 9, I knew that I did not want to get married early. I did not want to follow the path that she had chosen or was choosing for me, and that I wanted to study. I actually wanted to study speech and hearing therapy. I got to matric and results came out. I was 1 point short. So we're sitting in the queue for registration. I begged my dad to let me go ahead and study. My mom was not impressed. And in the queue, I'd met somebody who said, well, if you don't get in, you could always just try this. And it was the Bachelor of Administration and Industrial Psychology or Human Resources. So it was, even up to that point, it was quite a battle. I was bulimic for most of my high school. Nobody knew that. And I was always the girl that didn't own a pair of jeans, didn't own earrings, didn't own a pair of shorts, could not wear short clothing, makeup, or anything like that. So going out was really embarrassing. I would go on school excursions wearing a dress, Or I would go down the road to my cousin's house, wear a dress, change and come back. Going to university was just the same. Being at the age where you were looking at boys and hoping they'd look back at you. No one was going to look at you being this very plain, my hair down here. So none of what you see today is what I looked like back then. How Mervyn still stayed with me, or married me at that point, I always wonder. But anyway, must have been something. But it was very difficult. And I think even now, my mum has never accepted the person I've become. So I think that we still clash.
Gee, that's fascinating. Craig Coombs is a dear friend of mine. He's CEO of a business called Multiply, which is a global private equity investment house. And I can honestly say that he's one of my heroes in the faith, and we have a deep friendship. But Craig, I never met your dad, but every account that I've ever heard of him was that he was an incredible man. What impact did that have on your life growing up?
Yeah, Chris always likes to get people to cry, so I think that's why he chose that question. Yeah, look, I think one of the biggest blessings that I've had in my life is the father that I was given, and it's incredible how an older person can just suck you into a space and can create space for you. My dad had a common saying, "Don't stand on my shoulders, stand on my head." And really what he was saying was, use me to the most you possibly can to get to wherever you need to go. I'm here to serve you. Which is it's quite incredible when you grow up knowing that that's how your father treats us. And as a result, I think my view of God our Father is an incredible, I know he's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and that he wants so much more for us. And just as my father would say to me, stand on my head, God's saying the same thing to us, is I'm here and I've got incredible things I've placed in you, far beyond what you could ever hope or think or imagine. Just believe me and use me and use my Holy Spirit, which I've given to you to do greater works through you than my very son that was sent to earth. So yeah, a massive impact, and I think the impact on it is that I just want to see young men and women stand on my head and go beyond whatever I could have done or should have done. Even our business Multiply is about multiplication. It's about spawning way more than we could ever hope or imagine. It's been a crazy ride, but I know that God's got even more in store, and that we have got no idea how much He wants to change people's lives. He wants to impact the poor. He wants us to bring Jesus Christ in flesh into our city and into our spaces.
Brilliant, Craig. So, Spoo, you didn't have the privilege of having a dad. In fact, you got three siblings or two, the three of you, and all from different men. But Spoo, you overcame real adversity and real against the odds. But mentorship is something that God gifted you with. And you've got an interesting story how you actually met your mentor. And I'd like you to tell us that story.
Okay, thanks, Chris. As you said, I only have 3 siblings, and the song we have different fathers. So that's why, firstly, I took that decision of when I get married, I only have. I want my children to have one father and one mother. So that is why I took that decision. And by not having a father in my life, God provided me with mentorship. And one of my mentors, through miracle again, was Mr. Gold. What's happened there is that I started a brokerage. I started a brokerage, insurance brokerage, and I was doing life at that time. selling life is sometimes difficult because if kunama lapse, if someone doesn't pay the premiums and there's those lapses and hey, it's a headache. Then I was invited to play a golf. I never played golf in my life, but I was invited to play golf, and I went there. It was in Beechwood. I went there and I arrived late. And when I arrived late there, and then the ladies there, they told me, "No, okay, where are your clubs? Because there is your team is waiting for you there." Hey, I was stretching my head to say, "No, what are those clubs now?" And they say, okay, if you don't, and then I just told them that I forgot them at home, okay. And then they told me, okay, it's fine, just go to Elendola, to that shop, you can hire them there, okay. And then I went there, and I got this guy, and Wang Chelugu, you know what, there is the clubs, they are this much, and then, but you have to buy the balls. I said, again, I have to buy the and I'm a bowler to play. He said, no, you have to buy the balls again to play. I said, no, I can't do that. And then he told me, no, go and tell them that the clubs are, I say Hambil. Yeah, well, so I went to that lady and then I told them, you know what, the clubs, they all hired out, it's okay? And then they told me, no, it's fine, but I can come for eat dinner at night. So that is where I met my mentor, which is Mr. Gold. Fortunately enough, on that dinner there, we were sitting on one table. And then he told me, Uguti, instead of doing live, but you can do actually a short term. And then you can sell insurance to taxis. And then you must come and visit me. He told me that I must come and visit him in his office, of which the following Monday I went there. He explained it to me. And then by taking his advice, I lost the house. I lost the house and things went very bad. But I tried to build up from there. I have faith and I build up from there. And now I have a successful brokerage through insurance taxes. And I've got a fully paid house now. And yeah, so, and from there, I have opened up a panel beating shop in Hillcrest, which is called Upper Highway, and we are employing over 30 staff through that.
Brilliant. Go for it, Karabo. Sorry, before you add, if anybody wants to know how not to mentor, see Dave afterwards. I'm joking, Dave. Thanks for the investment that you made into this man's life, man.
Yeah, that's super inspirational. And I want to take this opportunity to add a thought, because I think what we really need to do for you in the room today, I hope, is somewhat encourage you, but also to kind of, I think, give you some insight into some practical thoughts about what's possible and what's necessary to change the challenges that we have in our city. I think as believers, we need to be practical. And so I think there's a lot to be said about what we as entrepreneurs, many of us sitting in this room are entrepreneurs, need to do in terms of our strategic outlook, how we understand the blessings that God has given us, how we need to deploy them in the kingdom, and how we do so in innovative ways to bring change in our country. But something super practical before we even get to some of that is what my brother's highlighting here. I teach a seminar called The 7 Things Every Young Black Entrepreneur Should Know. And it's really, it's all the things I've learned in 10 years of running businesses. And what I've realized is that being a black business person, and particularly being a young black business person, has a lot of idiosyncratic aspects to it, which are different from being, which are different for other business people. And amongst the greatest challenges is what my brother's highlighting here, is this opportunity that he had for mentorship. So some of you may be familiar with what is really a pretty large body of research out there, which speaks to the number one predictor of success in entrepreneurship. So if you consider all the things that might influence whether an entrepreneur succeeds over the long term or not, you might consider things like intelligence, the capital base of the family that I come from, which part of the world I grew up in, any number of different things you might want to account for. But the number one predictor of success as an entrepreneur is whether your parents were entrepreneurs. If you adjust for everything else, if your parents were entrepreneurs and you had the opportunity to grow up in a family where you watched mom and dad go to work and engage in entrepreneurial activity in a certain kind of way, nothing prepares you better for life as an entrepreneur. And so I imagine one of the things that we want and need as a nation, if we're going to break through this kind of malaise in which we find ourselves, is to develop a community of successful, sustainable black businesses in this country. And I'm not talking about tender-based businesses. I'm talking about innovative, job-creating, sustainable businesses. And so if that's what we want to see in this country, the question is, how do we get a cohort of black entrepreneurs who are in a position to do that? Because the truth is that the vast majority of us did not grow up in households where we had those role models. And so we as a church have a responsibility to artificially create a mechanism for black entrepreneurs to succeed. And that mechanism is mentorship. It's a willingness to invest directly, continually, and sustainably in people's lives for them to see us model what it means to be a success, what it means to be diligent, what it means to take risk, what it means to do all the things that are part of the package that leads one to be a successful entrepreneur. And black entrepreneurs, the next generation, needs that from us. And Dave, I want to just commend you for what you've done, but we need more people to do what he's done. And I just want to say one more thing. What I'm talking about, please, I am not talking about BEE. BE is a whole other thing for a whole other day, which has a whole other set of motives and incentives around it. I'm talking about you and me being willing to make time to go out of our way to sow into the lives of the next generation of black entrepreneurs.
Brilliant. And Karabo, when we chatted, I really had a sense that you believe that there's greatness in black people, and that you yourself, there's nothing that you feel is impossible that God can do in and through you. So, it's inspirational. So, Craigo, you love leadership development. Just on this whole theme of mentorship and leadership development, you see business as a platform to invest into others, and I personally have witnessed that firsthand. You see business as a spiritual calling. Speak to us a little bit about business and the impact that business can have into the next generation and investing into people.
Thanks, Chris. I think for me, it's been a bit of a journey. When I look back on where I am now and I look back from where I came, probably the thing that I had in my heart when I started out the most was actually just I love people. Actually wanted to be a doctor. It forced me to sort of work really hard. I'm quite dyslexic. I've only recently found that out. But, it just meant that I had to work really hard to get, fairly average marks. But there were prophetic words over my life around Joseph, actually. So it was quite interesting, the prophetic words that were coming through earlier today. And that there was really Joseph was a business guy. He's probably the best commodity trader of all time. He knew the weather conditions, so he really bought up a lot of commodities. He built warehouses to store it, and he created incredible wealth for Egypt. But he did it also under the banner of a mighty God and for the redemption of a region. And the reality is, I just really believe that God's placed in each one of us an incredible ability to lead and to direct and to understand the times that we live in. And so it's an incredible opportunity to invest into leaders, because I believe we're investing into people who are going to be there for the redemption of a region. And if you go through all of the biblical characters from Esther to Daniel to Joseph, they were marketplace people. They were guys that were just out there doing whatever that God had actually placed in them. And I really have a desire to see Christians in particular rise to positions of authority and positions of influence for our God and for such a time as this. So the reason really that I love investing into leaders and I believe in leadership is because I believe God's placed us in strategic positions in our city, in our nation, in our continent for such a time as this.
Brilliant. Sebastian, you studied industrial psychology, but you actually entered the world of international trade. And very, very successful, set up trade desks for PwC, Ernst & Young, and now you run your own outsourced consultancy in international trade. But whilst you're an incredibly successful businesswoman, it's really your heart and your passion for young girls that makes you get up in the morning and get to work. In a couple of minutes, because we are running out of our scheduled time, can you give us a little bit about your passion for this sector?
I think we've always been involved, my husband and I have always been involved with Sunday school or youth, and you know, whilst I hear Karabo and Sbu and mentorship and all of that, for me now, we need to take that actually way back when these kids are now even 12, 13, and 14. I think with the world changing, the social media and the stuff they're getting exposed to, we need to start teaching them life skills, and it's the soft skills. It's not just, you know, showing them the end results. We need to start making them confident or helping them to become confident, setting goals, become aware of what's happening around them. And I've watched, you know, we have a daughter and she's 19 and we have an older son. We've watched the differences between the two of them. And they've had issues over the years with just bullying, well, not bullying at school, but they've always spoken to us about the challenges they face. And I guess looking at some of the girls that I've mentored over the years and the young girls that I'm in contact with now, the issues that they have are so much more, it's so much more damaging than what I had to face. The stuff they're exposed to, the peer pressure from sex to drinking to cigarettes to how to dress and what car and what phone you have, and not all of them cope very well. And I think the pressure then goes back to the parents. But what I'm also finding is that the parents, you know, a lot of the parents, or the kids we interact with, the parents tend to send their kids off to school and expect the teachers to fix everything. And the girls are looking for role models. The girls are looking for women that they can look at and say, you know what, I can get there. It's happened to her, she was here, but she overcame this. And when I interact with girls from Merebank, and I'd say to them, gosh, I lived in the same road as you, they don't want to believe that. And I say to them, no, but you know, I did, I grew up. So for me, it's about breaking the cycle and saying to them, if your mom fell pregnant at 15, you don't have to do the same thing. You need to change the cycle, and you can change the circumstances. You can interact. You know, they always say the people you surround yourself with are so important because that drives you and that motivates you. So I guess that's my legacy. That's what I want to leave. I want to leave something behind where girls can look up and say, but I learned that from her, and I discovered that, and I discovered that it doesn't matter what happens to me and what situation I'm in at the moment, I can overcome it.
Fantastic. So we are out of time, but I want to ask Karabo one last question, and you're going to have to be quick here, quick and short. What message would you give to the white business people of South Africa?
Yeah, the message is we need to do more. Whatever you think is enough, we need to do more than that, because we're living through an economic apartheid in this country, and it is a moral outrage that we live with the level of inequality that we do, and it is not godly, it is not right, and it cannot stand, and it shall not stand. And if we want to live and raise our children and live out our dreams in this nation in the way that we all do, including myself, then all of us in this room, including myself, because I, unlike my brother Sbu, am a product of privilege. And so the responsibilities that I think are on everyone in this room are also on me. We need to do more, we need to give more, we need to be willing to go so much further because we're part of a covenant. I'll be very quick. You know, for me, the foundational scripture that speaks to me in this context is the Abrahamic covenant between God and Abraham. It is the birth moment. It's a hugely important historical moment because it's the birth of essentially of monotheism, of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And in that moment, there's a covenant made between God and Abraham's descendants. And God says, I will make you a blessing, and you will be a blessing. What's missing between those two clauses in that sentence is I will bless you so that you may bless others. So what I want us to break out of, what we need to break out of, is a framework and a mindset that believes that we do these things because it's good to do them. It's a charity mindset. We do good things because we're nice people. We do good things because we want to do good things. No, God has blessed us, all of us in this room, so that we can be a blessing. And we need to carry that responsibility, that covenant, with so much more seriousness and be willing to go so much further in giving what has been given to us, because it wasn't given to us for our own sake. It was given to us for the sake of others. And so we need to go so much further than we think we need to go.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Thanks, panelists.